Thank you guys for coming. It's 1 a.m. I'm starting to fall asleep, but I'll make it through for the next 45 minutes, and I hope you guys will too. The workshop is called Actually Finishing Your Game and Polishing It Too. The actually finishing part is making sure you have a game that functions, and polishing part is making the game enjoyable beyond the minimum functionality of a game. So things like pretty graphics or things like being fun, pretty important things in a video game. First, hello everybody. My name is Jin-Tae Kim. I do game dev, and I've done 8 game devs. Not 8 game jams so far. For people who don't know, game jams are like Hackathon, but specifically for video games. And in these jams, what I always try to keep in mind is to have a project goal of finish what I make and make it polished. Now, before we get any further, I want to do some audience survey here. Who here has made a game before? Show of hands. Oh, nice. And how many people finished that game, like completely finished that game? Okay, that's good. That's great. And how many people think their game was polished? Oh, yeah. There's no like set expectation for that or set things you can say to make you say the game is completely polished, but we'll talk more about that later. So let's start with my goal today. Why am I here? Why am I doing this workshop? And the reason I'm doing this workshop is to help you guys to make the best game you can in a hackathon. And the reason I want you guys to make the best game you can in a hackathon is so that you can get the most out of a hackathon as you can. But you don't have to finish a game to get the most out of a hackathon, and you don't have to make it polished to get the most out of a hackathon, and you don't even have to meet your goals to get the most out of a hackathon. But I find that meeting your goals and making a polished end product usually helps you get at least a little bit more than if you didn't. And I remember that my first game that I completely finished and would consider to be completely polished to my satisfaction was made in my first game jam that I did back in 2020. And that sense of fulfillment and accomplishment was what drive me to pursue game dev as my full-time career. So I hope you guys get a similar experience out of your guys' hackathon. But do beware, nothing I say is absolute or even industry standards. This presentation is going to be me sharing my methods and sharing my personal insights from my experiences. So please do take everything I say with a grain of salt, and feel free to agree, disagree, or modify how you interpret what I say in this workshop. Going back to getting through the process of helping you make the best game you can in a hackathon, we have to go through 3 milestones. First, we're going to learn about project planning. This is going to involve setting your goals and turning your idea into a design you can actually work on. 2, juicing it up. You're going to take your functioning game you made during the hackathon and maximize the fun portion of the game. And finally, presenting. Letting your project spread its wing, leave the nest of your own computer, and hopefully not die out there where people and their judging eyes are everywhere. Or not there. Here's a more detailed agenda of what we're going to need to do. We're just going to start off talking. I have 2 fantastic workshops for you guys to do. The first one is going to be a design exercise, and the second one is we're going to play a game together to find out more about what's fun in a game. So let's get started with planning. I say planning, but in large, I'm talking about planning in a sense of including all of goal setting, project planning, and game design. The reason you have to do these kind of things are because you're already doing it, even if you didn't consciously do it. So you guys came here for a reason, and you guys might have a reason you came here written down. But even if you didn't, something, that vague sense of goal has gotten you here at 1 a.m. instead of sleeping or enjoying the weekends to participate in a hackathon where I see a bunch of people carry around sleeping bags. Wow. That actually sounds kind of fun. I want to try sleeping in this building in a sleeping bag. It's like camping. Anyways, that leads us into this. First, calm down and think, what do you really want from this hackathon? What do you want to accomplish in this event? Even if you have a concrete goal like, I want to make a game to put in my portfolio, try asking yourself why you want to have a game to put in your portfolio. Why do you want that goal? You could say, I want to have a portfolio piece so I can get a job. You can ask further, why do you want a job? And obvious, but if you keep going, you don't have to find the meaning of life in a hackathon about asking yourself what you might want can get you more motivated in what you're doing, and maybe even find out the initial goal you set isn't actually going to help you accomplish what you truly want by accomplishing that surface level goal. From there, you can create what I call absolutes for your projects. These are tangible surface level goals and conditions you set on yourself and the projects based on your wants. Do notice that this is different from what you usually see in project goals or project specifications or design goals, in that the focus is on you and not the project. The focus is on you, the person doing the project. These absolutes can be anything like a specific genre of game you want to make, a piece of technology you want to learn, or just having fun with the event, or even something like knowing more about what you like in a video game development process. Setting these absolutes are great because it gives you a very concrete set of goals to work towards and work around. And when you're really limited to a certain set of rules and scope, I find that I become more creative instead of being paralyzed by the unlimited possibility and choices you have. Let's take a look at an example of absolutes from a mobile game I made called Sinking Tower on Android. If you guys want to download it, please go ahead. Nothing's stopping you. The three absolutes I set for myself were: 1, upload a game to the Google Play Store, which I did. 2, implement a method of monetization. I use Google Ads, Unity SDK to implement ads whenever you play around 3 games or so. And 3, create an expandable character IP for increased user engagement and multimedia potential, which, if I tell you the actual meaning of, is put an anime girl in it, which I did. That's Lucy. She wants to take over the world, but she has to deal with getting scammed by her landlord. None of these were actually based around the gameplay, but this project was a bit unique in that I started the project with a strong inspiration for the game idea and the mechanics. But so the project goals were more set around trying different things I can do with game development, like monetization or using new platforms. Anyways, part of what makes setting absolutes great is that it clearly sets what project success looks like. So from Sinking Tower, I made $5.61 in ad revenue. I know, I'm kind of rich, I'm kind of up there. And I spent $25 on the Google Play Store developer account and $116 in sending out ads. So I made a negative $135.39. Who's counting? But in my eyes, which is copium, the goals are still met because my goal wasn't to profit from the game. It was the absolute I said was to implement a monetization method. I can see you guys are thinking, wow, that's some strong copium right there. And it is, but setting those goals early prevents me from having conscious or subconscious expectation and disappointment that comes from seeing things like negative $135 loss. Whew. So now you've set your goals, it's time to start planning. And when I say when planning and designing something, especially in a hackathon, it's really important that you work within your abilities. If you don't work within your abilities, you will not meet your goal most of the time, unless you get really lucky. But you might also be asking yourself, hackathon is supposed to be a learning experience, as I say, learning experience. If I don't push to my limits, how will I grow like a Super Saiyan? That's a very great hypothetical question I asked. And the answer to that is when I say work within your ability, I'm including the ability to learn itself. You have to realize it's going to take a lot of time and energy to learn new things like a new game engine or even a function or a library within that game engine. And I'm not saying stay in your comfort zone. I'm saying stay at the edge of your abilities. And I gotta say, knowing what is within your ability is an ability in itself. And even if you don't meet your project goal in an event like a hackathon or in other projects, please do remember that's a necessary part of becoming a great developer and great at anything. Just knowing what you're scoping out, what your limit is, and growing from it. Now it's workshop time. Okay, now you guys get to actually do something instead of not doing something. So we're all gonna get started on our game project together. And the first thing we're gonna do is turn a game idea into a design on paper. Then we're gonna use the design to judge if the idea is something that's actually going to be fun and within our ability of scope. So first, I'm going to assume that you guys have an idea you want to find out more about, an idea you think you could maybe work on. You're not sure. It sounds fun. Not sure if you can do it. Not sure how much work it's going to take. And I'm not going to be sharing my ideation process in this workshop because that varies very differently from each person. But you guys are still welcome to ask after the workshop if you're still curious. But let's just pretend that my game idea and the genius that I am decided to come up with a game called Tetris. You guys never heard of this game before? Called Tetris. Let's see if it works. Nice. Okay. I was originally gonna do it on a drawing tablet, but switching between the screen and drawing tablet at the same time. I don't know how that works, so I'm just gonna do it on the whiteboard. But I do need that thing. All right. So how I usually go about turning a game idea into a design paper for Hackathon is I start by drawing the actual entirety of the game monitor onto a piece of paper. So you copy exactly what's going to be on the monitor at the end of development onto a piece of paper. Not paper, but pretend it is. So first, let me draw a computer screen. Is this big enough for everybody? Do notice that even here, there's already a design decision made. I decided that I was going to make a game for the PC, so it's going to be in a landscape view as opposed to a portrait view, like on a phone. And the general idea I have for Tetris is I can ramble on about the idea. There's going to be blocks falling down. If you make a full light of it, the lines disappear. Nobody knows what I'm talking about because Tetris doesn't exist. But I can draw it out on paper by having this middle segment here. And I'm going to draw in each component of Tetris. So in Tetris, there's one block falling at a time. So I'm just going to draw one block. And I'm going to draw some effect lines, to really show how things are going to be moving. And in Tetris, there's going to be the blocks that fall down are going to be stacked at the bottom. And I'm going to draw that as that's a very small Tetris board, but just drawing bigger for no reason. So there's going to be block at the bottom, block at the top. What else is in Tetris? There's actually going to be square UI elements showing what's going to be the next block coming. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not Tetris, that's Pentris. There's going to be foreshadowing of future blocks to fall. I'm gonna write next underneath it because in the UI I'm actually gonna make, I'm gonna put that in there. I'm gonna put those words next. I'm gonna put those diagrams in there. And on this side, in modern Tetris, there's a hold functionality. That's a mechanic. You can hold blocks in there. That's an idea. I'm holding that one. And also there's going to be a score. Lines. Tetris. That's the entire game of Tetris. Looks exactly like the Tetris you play, right? And afterwards, if you drew everything, if you copied over what's going to be on the game screen into a piece of paper, the next thing you can do is label each different component with its own label. So after you drew the game screen, you're going to break down each of the components and label what they are. I'm going to switch back to the computer because I've actually already done this on the computer. There we go. And after you draw the screen, you can also draw what kind of controls you have. You have shift for hold and swap, Z for rotate, arrow keys for left to move left, right to move right, up to hard fall, instantly teleport from dropping to place down, and down to fall faster. And with these labels you guys put for each component, you can just put a quick explanation of what they are. And then what you're gonna do is write down the goal and lose condition for the player. So the goal of Tetris is to clear as many lines as possible, and the lose condition is to let number 2, place blocks, reach the ceiling. All right, now you guys all have a piece of paper, and you guys are going to be doing this for your game or any other simple games like Tetris, Angry Birds, Minesweeper, Sudoku, whatever your game you want for the next 10 minutes. I'll go around. If you guys have any questions, I'll go around and answer them right now, but we're gonna do it for around 10 minutes. Oh. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. What doing this allows you to do is you have something on paper to look at and imagine how the player will interact with it. So you can play the game on paper within your head to imagine if it's going to be fun. And also another thing you can do is by seeing all the components required to make the game, you can start to judge if it's something you can actually finish in the game, because you can see all the functionalities you have to input, all the graphic elements you have to make, all the UI elements you have to make. It helps you with scoping also. Again, if you have any questions or trouble, please feel free to ask questions at any time. Who needs more time with who wants more time? It hasn't been 10 minutes, so we can have more time. Okay, I'm not quite sure if people want more time or people are good with moving on. Okay. I think, all right. If you guys are almost done, now just for like a minute, try looking at it and imagining how the game will move and play out with the player. And also start thinking about how much work you have to do to make this into an actual video game. From there, if you think the game is fun, and if you think it's within the scope of being finishable in a hackathon, which you can move on to the next part of the project. If not, get a different idea and repeat the same steps and repeat until you find a fun and doable idea. For the next step, I didn't put it here, but what I usually do is make a checklist of all the work I have to do, and that kind of makes a secondary check for if the project is within scope for a hackathon. All right. Are we good to move on from this workshop? Like this portion of the workshop? We're not done yet. All right, sounds good. All right, moving on. I hope you guys had fun with that, and I hope, or at least helpful, or the other way around. Not that helpful, but at least you have fun. Get something out of it. Now we'll skip through time, skip forward to the point where you use whatever tools you want, whatever tech you want, Unity, Game Maker Studio, Godot, Unreal Engine. You make your own computer out of sticks and stones and finish the game, and it functions. And it functions, but it might not be fun like the games you play. So how do we make the game feel more fun like the games we play on a day-to-day basis? To make a game more fun, let's first try to understand what makes a game fun. In my opinion, the core of a video game is in the interactivity. Looking at the drawing above, interactivity in a game is when some sensory input comes out of the game and computer. So the red arrow here, it's like the computer shooting out visuals and audio. It goes into your brain processes that, and you give your input through your fingers and into the controller. And then the computer takes that, processes it, gives the output again, and then your brain does it again, and then again and again, and then you go into a cycle of interactivity. Interactivity is what makes a game compared to other form of media like book or movies. In book or movies, it's just a one-way output, and your brain processes it, and that's it. No more input. But in a game, you have this back and forth between the media and you. So interactivity is what makes a game, and interactivity is what makes a game fun as a game. Now then, since we know what interactivity is, let's feel what juice is for ourselves with a second interactive portion. We're going to go back to being 5-year-olds and play a game called War, or maybe it's called Soldiers, depending on how you played it, where you grew up. And basically, how you play, and I'll demonstrate, is you pretend you're soldiers, and then you get your finger guns out, and then you start shooting people. And you go, pew, 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 pew. Maybe you can get a machine gun to, or get a rocket launcher and like that. So we're going to play that all together. So how we're going to play is this side of the workshop, and this side of the workshop are enemies now, and you're going to start shooting each other. Now you can start playing. Start shooting each other with your fingers. Calling my soul control. Now, let's keep playing, but this time, don't make any sound with our mouths. Just do, instead of pew, pew, pew. Okay. You guys can keep on playing. Do you guys feel how much less fun this is compared to? That's because we took out the juice of audio from the game. Now, let's play War again, but we're going to make it suck even more by having no movement when you shoot. So just point your fingers and think about shooting the other person. All right. Now just imagine you're shooting the other person now. No sound. Wow, it's a real fun game, isn't it? It's getting worse and worse. Now, next, to make it suck even more, don't even make finger gun. Just point your fist at them. We took out the juice of visual from the game, and now, even though we're playing the same game, we can't even tell what we're doing anymore. So now let's go back to the start. Play War as freely as you want. Make all the noise you want. Do you guys feel how fun that is compared to the last version we played? No movement, no animation, no sound. Those are the things that, beyond the feature you put in the game, what makes a game fun. Now, I can actually make this even less fun, and to demonstrate that, I'm gonna need a volunteer from the audience, a brave soldier from the audience. Is anybody willing to come up with it? Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for the brave soldier. Okay, now we're gonna play, you and I, and play war, but we're going to start off from the worst version we played, the one where you point the fist and imagine. But this time, so we know when you shoot, just say you shot me. All right, let's play. You're dead. Okay, and you read aloud what I just.
I'm truly here.
Yes. I took out the immediacy of the interaction. So instead of getting shot immediately, there's a delay between the interaction, making the game less fun. So because the quality of the interaction just decreased from what you would expect in a war setting, you shoot someone, they should get shot immediately, about 3 seconds later. It makes the game less fun. But in the other way around, I can make the game more fun by adding more juices into it. So we're gonna go back to playing more, but with all the pew-pews you want. And you're gonna shoot me?
And that adds agency into the game, the juice of agency. When kids usually play war, nobody dies because the kids are too busy being the main character of the war. But you would expect when you shoot someone for them to die. And because I just gave him the interaction that his actions have actual meaning and consequence in the game, it adds a juice of player agency. And I can add the juice of narrative into it to put storyline into it to make the game more fun and feel more engaging. Okay, here we go. How could you? I loved you like my brother. Oh. Yeah. And by adding context into the game, in a story sense, you can make the game feel more fun, even though the basic game we're playing were the same to begin with. Again, go back to your seat, and thank you very much for your participation. Now, this is all in a physical game. So how would this actually tie back in when we're making a video game where technology is involved instead of just our fingers and hands? Compared to that, this is a piece of technology. Engineers, designers, and artists came together to make this. And what this piece of technology does is it adds more enforceable rules, just like a video game. Compared to pew pew pew, where nobody dies. With this, you have a more clear rule of if you get shot, you're dead. And also, just by the design of this Nerf gun, compared to something like an airsoft gun or a paintball gun, where they have more realistic military look in the toy design they have. It sets a certain direction for the atmosphere and the mood of the game you play. I just got this because it was the cheapest one, but it clearly has a fantasy theme going on. So you would expect that when I'm playing with this, it's more fantasy-based and lighthearted compared to when I'm having a full ghillie suit with a replica airsoft gun that actually hurts when you get shot by it. Maybe I should have one more time. All right, that's it for this So, because video games are a technology just like this, which is all it is, a toy, a tool to help the player play, guide the experience of the player. Do try to think about how the product you're making, a video game, isn't the full thing you're trying to make. Ultimately, what you're trying to achieve with a video game you make is the enjoyment created by the player in interaction with the toy you made. And that's it for the segment. In the exercise we just had, there were tons of sorts of juices that
add more fun than the bare functionality they have. There was visual juice, the finger guns. There's audio juice. There's like physicality, how you're moving around, moving your own body, temperature orientation. In video games, the output stimuli a video game can give to a player is usually limited to visual and auditory feedback. So screen you see, sound you hear. There are things like VR and haptic feedback, but let's ignore those for today. And even though there's only 2 stimuli, I can see there are 3 types of juices that come out of it. There's reflexive visual juices like graphics and animation, seeing like a bird on screen and knowing it's a bird, or seeing blood on screen and getting, oh, that's blood on screen. There's reflexive audio like sound effect and music, the immediate mood a sound effect and music creates. But there's also cognitive juices. These are like story, how he killed his own brother and what that means in society and what it means to be a human being. Yeah. Or scores in a video game or win conditions. Things that aren't physically there as an asset, but are created in the player's mind as a goal to pursue or emotion created by those assets. I won't be talking too much about cognitive juices today, but do think about it in your game. It's the main part of interactivity in a game, like the scores. The point of Tetris is to get a high score. So that's pretty important in a game like Tetris. And visual juices can be in the form of assets like drawings, 3D models, UI, animation. Drawings like 3D models and sprites, title screen arts, and cutscenes, these give context for what the game is supposed to be and what the player is doing in the game world, as opposed to everything being abstract squares and numbers. You can play chess, but imagine playing chess where all the pieces are just writing of knight, pawn, rook on the same circular pieces of paper. It's less fun and it's less clear like that. Visual effects like explosions, you can see there, or particle effects like when you in Candy Crush, when you clear something, and there's like sparkles come out and stuff. Those can be a reward you give to the player for doing something you wanted them to do, or punishment for players for them doing something you didn't want them to do. Like beat an enemy, look at the pretty explosion, it's bright, you like bright, pretty things. There you go, that's your reward for beating the enemy. You can get these assets from places like Unity Asset Store, itch.io when you search for them, and free videogamegraphics.com, or can make it yourself. And always be aware that there are free resources to create or modify a pre-existing asset to fit into an asset to your needs. Some free drawing software or image editing softwares are GIMP, Paint.net, and FireAlpaca. And using these softwares, consider switching the color of some graphic you found online. Hopefully, and please try to get them if you have the rights to them. Royalty-free ones are everywhere. Mashing 2 graphics together, or even drawing on top of graphics you got. And there are also the audio juices. This part I find that a lot of people skip out on. And as we saw from the exercise, sound can really spice up and emphasize certain actions and events in the game. Remember, it's just this and pew 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 are night and day. This pew 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 is what really makes the fun of playing war. And also sound effects can not only apply to actions being taken in a game, but also to emphasize events and goals accomplished. So for example, when Mario jumps on a pole, it goes brrrr, pew, pew, pew. Some of these are things that are happening in the game world, but some of these aren't happening in the game world, but they both emphasize that you did it, you made it, you accomplished something, be happy with yourself. You can get free sound effects from sources like Fesliyan Studio or freesound.org, or you can pay to get them from places like, again, the Unity Asset Store or other FS sound effects distributor. I put these links in the hack pack, so afterwards when you're making your game. If you want to access any of these resources, do check them out. And also for a lot of these resources, you can just Google what you want and put royalty free at the end of it. And you can usually find what you want available for you legally. But quality and how it fits into your game style isn't guaranteed. And what I really like about audio assets are that, unlike visual assets, they're much more flexible. For visual assets, it's much harder to ignore the details and style of an asset. Like an example here, the tough and rough Doom guy wouldn't fit too well in a casual game like Animal Crossing. I guess kind of the color match in here, so it does kind of fit in. And that is a crossover I think a lot of people are looking to see. But for sound effects, the audio, is it playing?
Yes.
Yeah, it is playing. It's harder to actually tell what the original sound came from. Now, even though the sound made aren't actually recording of a foot stepping on snow, it's actually either like blankets rubbing against each other. Your brain can't really tell that the sound you hear aren't actually coming from what they're meant to be. Yeah. And you can really take advantage of that by taking open source programs to do composing or audio editing. If there's a sound effect you like or a sound effect you recorded, but you want it to be like, maybe it goes on for too long, you need it to be shorter, or maybe it's pitched too high, or it just needs to be bass boosted. You can use open source software, Audacity. It's great. It's fun to use. It's really easy to learn how to use to edit the sound effect to your needs. Now that we're over with that, let's talk about things to put in your game before releasing it to the real world. First of all, you got to remember that the players are not you, and you won't always be right beside them to teach them how to play the game and talk about your intentions and what your creative process, what your creative genius was in the game you made. And while your friends and family might sit through your project, that's a bit hard to understand. A lot of people who don't know you personally, or even people like potential employers looking at your portfolio, won't likely put in the time and energy to learn how to play your game. So firstly, what you should do is make a tutorial and make sure you make one that's easy to understand and not easy to make. This tutorial is from one of the game jams I did. I had 30 minutes to make the tutorial and submit it. Nobody read it. You can see there, it's like there's lore at the top line. The controls are kind of in bold, but it's kind of hard to read. Can you guys tell you're supposed to use the arrow keys to move? And I tried to explain like the mechanic of the game, but nobody read it because it's hard to read. It's not clear at all. Now, compared to a more recent game I made called Far But Close Behind, you can see the tutorial is much more simplified. It doesn't interrupt the player like the previous one. You have graphics, very short reading you have to do, very easy to understand. And for the win condition, I drew graphics to help the player understand it. So try to make the tutorial and whatever learning experience you're trying to give to the player as intuitive as possible instead of easy to make. And also, a part of the tutorial was in the level design also. So the goal of this game is to bring the head of the dog adjacent, so right next to the dog's tail. And if you look at the level design, it really guides the player to go around that rock formation. So there's not too much else to do. So it kind of naturally nudges the player in the direction I want them to go to learn the game. Also, if you can play test, do it as much as you can. And play testing isn't the same as bug testing, because in play testing, it's seeing if the design and implementation works as intended. When you show your game and people don't get it, people understand how to play the game, people understand what the point of the game is, most of the time, It's your fault, not the player's fault. And it's usually a problem of communication or not thinking through enough about the interaction the game has. So things like balancing or how UI is understood by people that didn't work on the project. And when you take feedback, I really want you to try to keep the initial hurt feelings down. It hurts so much when you get that feedback, when people don't understand the love you put into the game. And don't defend yourself by giving them your reasoning. It's your choice as a developer to whether or not to take the feedback that anybody gives you. And also remember that giving proper feedback is also a skill in of itself. So, and people don't really have experience with doing either. So no need to feel too hurt by whatever suggestions or whatever criticism people give. In the end, what I try to do is just listen, think about it, and only say our intentions to ask them clarifying questions. And what I can say about people giving criticism is that the feeling they feel is always true, but their reasoning may not be. It may be or it may not be. And finally, try to make your game accessible as possible. I tried to see what kind of game people made for Hackathon from last year, but actually I wasn't able to play any of them because all the uploads they had were GitHub repos of the project folder and not the build itself. If you want somebody to play that, that would involve somebody pulling your Git repo, unzipping it, going through README if you created one to figure out what engine they used, and then installing that engine, opening it up, going through all the dependency problems. That's way too much work for somebody to play a game for 5 minutes. So what you can do is make a build. Most modern game engines have a one-button build solution. You can just click the button and it makes an exe executable or whatever they use in Apple. And what I can recommend here is to make a browser build, like WebGL build. If you can play on the browser, you don't have to download it. You don't have to unzip anything. You don't have to build 2 builds for Windows and Mac. So you kill 3 birds with 1 stone, I guess. And after you make those builds in whatever form, instead of putting it just on GitHub, try to put it also on game sharing websites like itch.io. They make sharing the game a lot more easier, and it makes it looks prettier. You can customize the game page to put whatever pretty graphics you want. And yeah, also try to build 2 hours before the deadline because something always happens. And that's it. That's it for the workshop. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's like 1:56. Thank you guys for sticking through it. If you have any questions, I'll take them right now. And I'm also supposed to show this. Yeah.
When you're making a game, do you typically start with like the concept or the narrative first and then build mechanics around that? Or do you start with the mechanics and build a story around it?
That depends on what game you want to make. I've done both before. For the example, let me actually pull up my portfolio. For Sinking Tower, I was going to bed and I thought, those like meteor falling games you have to dodge? It would be really fun if you could actually catch the falling meteor and have that be a part of the game. I started with the idea for the mechanic, and then I built the whole story of Lucy getting scammed by her landlord, and she ended up in a place where lava rises continuously, and she has to escape that. So that one, I made the mechanics first. For Far But Close Behind, I started the project with the idea, the image of a dog being really long and stretching itself around the earth, and I made a mechanic based around that. So it can go either way. It really depends on what your focus is for a project. You can that could be a focus, one of the goals you set. You can have a hackathon where you make a game focused around the mechanic or focused around the story. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very. Wait.
So I know you were talking about like the juice before.
Yeah.
But, isn't it difficult to kind of decide on? I know like the audio and the visual aspects of the game can add a lot to a game, but if you don't, isn't it hard to kind of decide how those will affect your project if you haven't? I mean, I guess like what I'm trying to say is it's hard to do both that and make the actual game mechanics at the same time, isn't it?
A lot of yes, that is part of scope, and that's why when you make the reason you want to design the entire project at the start is so that you can see how many juices you have to put in to make the game feel polished, and how big the mechanic is, and how big the mechanic is, and if you can do that at the same time. If you're trying to make a full, polished, complete product, try to limit your scope to a point where it can both do the mechanic and the visual audio juices at the same time. Yeah. And yeah, great questions.